Hey everybody, welcome back to Open Spaces Podcast with Jeff and Jourdan Johnson. We're glad that you're back, and we hope you listen to episode 1 because that actually would fill you in on where we're picking up.
Yeah, lots of context there that you'll probably want to have for this episode.
Yeah, we do want to just say, I would like to tell you that we had to re-record this episode 2 here. I talk a lot about my struggle with same-sex attraction, and that's really uncomfortable for me. And so I was very concerned when I did it the first time that every word I was saying, that I had fear of judgment. I had fear of, am I saying this right? I don't want somebody feeling judged by us. I want to love people well, and I'm trying to open my life up. And that's an uncomfortable place, because if you were trying to share all of your junk with somebody, it's not easy. And so we had to come back and re-record this and say really what we wanted to say, because we didn't do that at first. We were a little fearful. So I just want to start this with saying, please give us grace in what we're saying, and listen to how we are saying it in a way that with open ears, open hearts, to just receive what we're saying and know that this is our story. This is what God has done for us and for me personally. And I just, I invite you in, and I'm inviting you into the darkest places of my life. So welcome into that.
Yeah.
And but that's not been easy. Just want to say that off the top. So
we recognize that this is a very touchy subject, and people have such vastly different experiences that are walking in any level, that are questioning their sexuality, that are confused, or that maybe you're not confused, but maybe you're maybe it veers from what seems typical around you. And so we understand that there's a lot of different ways to walk this out, to think about it, to even consider how it intersects with your faith. We are really, like Jeff said, just wanting to share what we have seen to be true in our lives, and understand that there's nuance to everything and to everybody's stories. But we also want to be bold in sharing what we've seen, and tell you with confidence that we believe this to be true, and we are just grateful to the Lord for bringing us where He's brought us.
And it may lead to a lot of questions for you, so you can go to openspacespodcast.com and reach out to us. We'll also have open.spaces.podcast on Instagram. But send us a message and ask us questions if you have those during this episode, because that would be awesome for us to try to figure out how we can help and how we can serve you best in our story. So that's what we're here to do. So welcome back to Open Spaces.
So we're back. We are here in episode 2. Our first episode ended with kind of towards the end. We had been dating for a while, and we got to this place where
you're having the time of your life.
I was so happy and worry-free, but things were not going great, and so we were at a crossroads. And you finally revealed to me like your biggest secret, that you had basically been living with same-sex attraction, and you had never told anyone before.
Yeah.
So you finally told me, and that became like a real turning point for us. But today we're going to talk about just more about what life for you had been like up to that point, and what it is like today. So that's significant. That's big.
Yeah.
How do you feel going into this episode?
I feel great about it. And the fact that we have our massive iPads here tells you that we have put some thought into this. And that we know what we want to say.
You're not just playing like Candy Crush.
Yeah. Is that still a thing?
I'm pretty sure it is.
Are you just dating yourself? Okay. I feel great about it. And I feel like this is something that people that know me and that I walk with and are close to me, it's been something that I feel like you and I carry this like God miraculous story.
Yeah.
And so it feels whole, and it feels like another step for me to wholeness and healing, to actually share it. And I've done a lot of work in my life on what are my values in life, and vulnerability and authenticity are 2 of my top 5. So for me to actually get to sit and talk about this, yes, it's weird and it's a little scary for me, but I value being a authentic and vulnerable person. And
so anybody who knows you even a little bit knows that. I
feel
like most people that come in contact with you are like, wait, why did I just tell you my secrets?
Yeah, that's what I like.
You go there.
And also, I just think when I was working through all of this over 20 years, I didn't have guidance or leadership in it. And so for me, if I can be a guide or a help, I don't see myself as the answer. I'm not. If I can help somebody,
totally,
then that's why we're sitting here and we're doing this today. So that's the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think you've gotten to this point? Why would you air out all of your junk to strangers?
Well, I referenced this in the intro, but for us, we want to. The number one thing is to help people, like I just said, and what I referenced in our intro. But it's to help people. It is to have a conversation around this topic without having to, specifically like in the global church too. Yeah. Specifically not to whisper the word gay or homosexual, or we've been recipients of that. Totally. And where people are terrified of talking about it specifically in the church context. And if we can help people with that and shed some light on what it's like and bridge this gap that I feel like there's and maybe ignorance is a strong word, but it's not because people want to be, they just don't know.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know, don't know. And then there's other people who this is all they think about, and they're sitting around us in churches, and it's like, that's a big deal. And we want to normalize this conversation. And what you and I know and what we've experienced is the more that we talk about it and people know our story, the more that people come to us and share, me too. And I didn't know that this was possible to talk about. And I didn't know that this was an option to be talking about it in this way, where I actually want to fight it and I want to work through it. Yeah. And I want to follow Jesus, and I don't know how to do those things. So we've seen the benefit of sharing it with people, and then watching people become more whole and feeling seen and value in who they are. So that's a big reason.
That's amazing. I think a lot of people are very curious. Like you just said, you don't know what you don't know. If there's ignorance, people still feel like that this is a choice people make. Yeah. Or that there's a lot of questions about how did this develop? Yeah. Would you say this is always the way that you felt? Talk about just the earliest you can remember.
Yeah. And I just kind of like laugh when you say it's like a choice that you get to make. Yes, in some ways, but I don't know many people who would say I chose that because that seemed like the fun route.
Right.
Because whether people are choosing to live this lifestyle openly or if they're fighting against it, I would bet it hasn't been an easy road for them.
Right.
So either way, there hasn't been an easy path for them.
Totally.
But for me, as long as I remember, I was attracted to men. And we referenced something in episode 1 about that happened in my childhood, and that was with a neighborhood boy that was older than me. And without getting all the details later, I came to realize it was sexual, and I wouldn't attribute everything to now I'm same-sex attracted because that's been my struggle because of that one instance. But it did bring confusion. Yeah. And sexuality is confusing. You
felt bad and you felt it was wrong in the moment.
Yes, I felt that led me to a lot of shame as a little kid that I've done work now to realize. But then I was led to shame. I didn't like myself. That began me hating myself on this journey of like, that's shame and secret. And that was a big thing that started a lot of other things in my life. But then hormones kicked in high school, and at that point I started exploration of my thoughts. I had sleepovers with guys, and that led to the first time that I acted out. And there's a lot of guys that I've talked to that would say I struggle with this, but they haven't acted out. But so it's just a mental game, and they're really fighting that. And it's not lesser than, but for me, I acted out, which took me even darker into now I'm acting out.
Because you're feeding the desires.
I'm feeding my flesh.
Yeah.
And when you feed the flesh, it's feeding the beast. And it's like, then you just keep going. So I just kept going down this spiral. And then I go into college. I hid who I really was. I wanted to, and I didn't really know who I was. I'll say that. I can't even say I knew who I was. I wanted to fit in. But what I knew fitting in was not telling people or showing people my actual desires. So I was trying to have friends and guy friendships, but also having this like secret life that was developing, and felt like those two things were, there's no lane to like merge those two things together. So it led to more do this, live in shame and secrecy over here, but then by acting out, or choose to just fit in with the crowd and hide, and then I'm having to hide who I was. And post college, I even moved into more anonymous encounters. And for the listener, if you don't, that's a term that is used a lot, but it's literally meeting someone somewhere, and then you have you go somewhere and you have sex, or you have a sexual encounter with a person, and then you never see them again. So it's an anonymous encounter, and that began for me. And every time I acted out, I didn't tell one single person. So I would act out, I would regret it instantly. I would feel regret. I would feel shame. I would go back to the hidden closet of being secret. And I was just so filled with shame, and I just couldn't get out of that cycle. That was just a cycle that became real normal to me. And I didn't know there was another option.
That cycle is very damaging. It's like you feel shame, so you feel like you can't say anything, so you don't keep doing it. Feel more shame. You feel like you have no space or safe place to talk. You don't even want to. It doesn't sound like you even wanted to find a safe place to talk. It was just more like you were.
No, I mean, at that point, I had just resolved this is life. Like this is how life is going to go. I didn't have like a plan. I didn't have an end game. It was just like this is my life. And
when do you think it got the darkest? Like when did all the shame and secrecy kind of come to a head, and like you reach a low point?
Well, I remember moments in high school, like hating my life and wanting to take my life when this began, the depth of it began. I really remember the darkest moment was when I had actually started to really work through it. So I was later in my 20s. I had told you, and now I'm in the battle of, okay, I'm trying to come out of this and do the hard work to come out of it. But there was a moment that I remember that was the darkest, that it was Thanksgiving. I hadn't gone home to see my family. I stayed in Dallas, and I was at my apartment. I just remember getting so drunk and thinking, if I just keep drinking, maybe this will end. And it's a miracle that I made it through that night. But that night was probably the darkest that I got.
Wow.
So
what would you say to someone who finds themselves in a similar place right now, that's really just at the end of their rope?
I would hope that someone listening to this that feels unworthy of love, that what I've done is too bad, that there's no hope for me, that I just wish my life was over. Those were all real things for me. And I would hope someone hearing my voice that has done a lot of hard work would hear me say it's not easy, but it is worth it. And that somebody in your world cares about you. And if you can't find that somebody, then literally get on your knees right now and ask the Lord, say, show me who you see me to be, and show me how you care about me, and show me right now how I matter to you. Because he created you. He created every piece of you. He understands you. There's no one who understands you more. But I would say to that person, he loves you. And that is true. That is the one thing I know is true. So reach out to somebody cares, you matter, and you really matter to God.
Yes, that's right.
Because you're his kid.
I would love for you to talk more about how faith has played into all this. Maybe you could talk about maybe a little bit about like how what you thought about the Lord played into it, and even maybe what your upbringing showed you about this whole issue, about how people were treated or what people thought about it. How did all that kind of work itself into your life?
Yeah. Pre-Jesus, before I met the Lord, I hid the me that acted out and lived to fulfill my desires. I hid all that because it was socially wrong.
Why did you think it was socially wrong?
Well, because it was the 90s.
Sure.
And in the 90s, it was a different day than where we are today. And it was just wrong. There was no one openly living a gay lifestyle and feeling like that was socially acceptable.
Yeah.
And so what it did for me was I just kept saying, yeah, that's not right. But so I'll try to like not do it. Post meeting Jesus, I will say the Holy Spirit inside of me is what really was my motivation from wanting to walk away from it. Because for me, I could never, those anonymous encounters I mentioned and the acting out, I could never do that and walk away. Every time I walked away, it was the spirit inside of me that was not letting that settle with me. I never felt what I thought was going to be resolved never was resolved. And the desires of feeding my flesh never really felt. It was, like I said, it was just a bad cycle. But the spirit inside of me is what changed. And I think pre-Jesus, for me, it was about fulfilling what I'm talking about, my desires. It was some of that would be that it was all about me, pre-Jesus. It was about me. After meeting Jesus, understanding the gospel, surrendering my life to him, life looked really different. And my eyes were open to the fact that it was not about me. Life is not about me. This what I'm given and what God made me and created me. And this life is not for me, it's for him. And when I met him, I became an heir to this kingdom that is far greater than this world. The things we see, the things we touch, we're just heirs of a different kingdom. And my filter became more of that. And I'm not, and for a long time, I would even, when I became a Christian, I would say like, I don't want to do anything that I'm not going to do in heaven. Now, that was just like, it was my filter for a lot of things, but it was, I desired so much to know the Lord and if I'm not going to do this in heaven, why would I do it here? And so it
comes from a pure place of like really wanting to please the Lord.
Yeah. That was like, early Christian of like, I'm not ever going to do anything that, my eyes were really open to my purpose on this earth. Like I understood how big and great God was and everything existed for him and not for me.
Yeah.
And that was a process because when I met the Lord, I remember meeting the Lord and in college, I was a junior in college. I was at this college conference called Passion. And it was in this moment that I made all these promises to God. I said, I'm for the first time, I'm understanding who Jesus is. I'm making all these false promises to him that we're all in good intent in the moment. God, I've lived this way. I'm never going to do that again. And I didn't have, and so what discipleship later would teach me is that's a process when you meet the Lord and you walk out of whatever your thing is. And for me, it was this same-sex desire. But as I had to journey through that and walk out of that, that was a long process. And it took ups and downs and failures and success. And for anyone, it takes that. But it was just walking out of that. And it was just a long process and struggling to walk with God and choose him. It wasn't easy. I don't think it's easy for any of us, but for me, this is the thing that was the thorn in my side and like, didn't make it easy for me. But I'll say this, the main difference, to sum that up, the main difference for me is that my desires didn't change when I met the Lord, but my allegiance changed when I met Jesus.
That's beautiful.
So when I met Jesus, my desires didn't miraculously go away, but my allegiance changed. And I was living for a greater purpose. And the purpose was to tell others about Jesus and what he's done and offer hope to people that I had received. And I think maybe somebody listening to this would say, it sounds like you still are fighting these same-sex desires. So what did Jesus do for you? If he didn't remove it, then is he good? And like, why would you even say, what did he do for you? And I would just go to the gospel and I would say, well, he did a lot for me. He came for me. He came from heaven. This God who created everything, he came, he took on flesh. His name is Jesus. He moved towards humanity. He showed us what it is to love unconditionally. He showed us how to not judge people, but to love people. And he lived a perfect life, not giving into his flesh and his desires, but stayed focused on his mission at hand. And that was to live the perfect life and go to the cross and take all of our sins on him. And 3 days after being buried, he rose from the dead. And he told us to go make disciples until he comes back. And that has been the shift. That is my goal now. And this, what we see, we're sitting in our home in Atlanta, Georgia, and everything around us, we call this our house. This is not our home. Our home is in heaven. This suffering that we endure on this earth, it's all fighting our flesh. It's all temporary. It's reframing those things day to day. And when you reframe that, it diminishes how big the thing is that's in front of you, the thorn in your side. And I fail a lot in life as I fight to do this, but I always come back to, I'm a child of God, and his voice is the only one that matters to me. And every day when I wake up, I will fight that day to know him more, to spend my day knowing him more every single day. And that's the call of a Jesus follower. And so, yeah, my desires have not changed, but my allegiance completely changed when I met him.
That's amazing, Jeff.
Yeah.
I mean, you just basically preach the gospel, which is where you have found and where I find any power to fight anything that doesn't agree with what God says is.
Yeah, it is our only hope. We don't have answers for people, but we do have the answer.
Yes.
And it's Jesus and his hope in whatever your struggle is, and the shame and the secrecy of the thing that you think that no one understands is too big, to talk about. He is the ultimate answer in all of that, but it's just a reframing of that. And it's saying, I'm going to put my stake in the ground, and this is what I stand for.
I want you to talk more about that, because like putting a stake in the ground seems very significant.
Yeah.
And I love that you talked about, everything you said essentially applies to me and applies to anyone listening here, that we all have things the desires that aren't, what God would be pleased with, but we fight them. We can fight them.
Yeah.
I think that's the point, is that we can fight them.
Yeah.
And not that it will never be easy. It will never feel natural. It will never feel, there will always be conflict and tension in that battle.
Yeah.
But that applies literally to all of us.
Yeah.
So you mentioned putting your stake in the ground. What does that look like for you? Because I know that you have done that. So explain that to people and how that kind of helps you in your fight daily.
Yeah, it's probably my number one thing to say to someone who is that, specifically when I talk to guys about this that are struggling with the same thing, but it applies to everyone. I think when I say put your stake in the ground, what I'm saying is you have to have a plan, and your decision has to be made. So
what's your decision?
My decision is I'm not going to give into my same-sex desires. That I have chosen, and I put my stake in the ground that I will not. I will fight that.
Yes.
And listen, if I had not put that stake in the ground, on the weakest of my flesh, I will choose my flesh. I will always go to that. And what keeps me from not doing that is that I said, I am putting my stake in the ground that I am not going to act out on this.
Yeah.
And you have to have a plan. Anything that has success in life has a plan. You have to have a plan. You have to have action steps. You have to have people holding you up to your plan. And you won't ever find success if you don't have that. So you need the plan. It's putting your stake in the ground. And for me, 20 years ago, when I put my stake in the ground and said, I'm not going to act out on same-sex desires, I knew culturally we were in a different time, that it was more, though it wasn't being talked about, it was more, great, good for you. Now, I knew a little bit and I wondered, but 20 years later in the culture that we sit today, it is almost more, we would probably get more harshly judged for living this life and for choosing what I have chosen.
Yeah, for
so the culture
it.
has, for fighting against it, because culture has completely taken a big turn on that. But I put my stake in the ground knowing that I wasn't committing to culture. I was saying,
that's awesome.
I'm not going to live that way, and I'm going to live in radical obedience to what the way he's asking me to live is it was between me and him. And I would ask or say to everybody, you have no idea what's on the other side of your radical obedience with Jesus. And somebody listening to this might say, yeah, it's great. You can say, you married a woman and I can't do that. I specifically with this struggle, like that's not possible for me. Well, I would have said the same thing. I said the same thing. I can't marry a woman, and I would never do that. I said those things, and I was curious what that would look like, but that wasn't the goal. And I'm not saying the goal is to get married. I'm saying the goal is to put your stake in the ground and say that this is what I'm choosing. And I was choosing to not live that lifestyle, and I was choosing to fight my flesh in a radical obedience to Jesus. And that's what I've fought to do.
And the victory for you isn't that you got to be married to a woman.
No, it's an overflow. The gift, the gift of what I have now is an overflow, I believe, of how kind God is to me. And that radical obedience has led to things that I had no idea that would ever be possible, but because he's a miracle worker, there's possibilities.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And for any of us, any person who is deciding to follow Jesus with their lives and their choices and putting their stake in the ground, the victory is being able to live a life that's thriving with Jesus and knowing that he's going to give us power to face whatever we are coming against, or whatever that looks like for any of us. I
want to say one thing to that too, though. It does take so much work. Like we're talking about this, but it takes spiritual, emotional, physical discipline, all of it. It all goes together. We're going to talk about that later. It's something that I really feel strongly in, about how much discipline it takes in order to accomplish big things. We are radically obedient to Jesus, but there is a part that we play, and that is a lot of discipline in our life that can get you there. And if your plan is to just live in your flesh, then it's a slippery slope.
Absolutely. But that's amazing. I have another piece that has been really important and pivotal for you and for us is the community around us, and how not only letting us, not only you sharing with me and letting me into your story, but letting other people in. So talk about that. Talk about what community, friendships, all that has looked like for you, for us, and kind of even your journey into being able to share more.
Yeah. The big thing is I couldn't, I don't know how I would be where I'm at without the friendships that have helped carry me to this point and have helped me stay on my plan. And that began. So after I told you, I shared with one other guy right after that, and he was a friend of mine. He was in the band that I was in, and I took a real big gamble on telling him. It felt really big. It felt as big as the night when I told you to tell him. But again, met me with grace, love, acceptance, and met me right in the middle of my pain and what I was bringing to him. And that kind of helped transforming of, I can talk to another guy about this. And then it became more with my band at the time. We were traveling together, and I wanted to make sure that I was trying to figure out what good accountability would look like. And so that involved kind of letting others in. And so the circle started to open, and I was always still analyzing people though. Like, is this person a trustworthy person? And I don't know if this person really will, how they'll handle this. And it's funny, every time I share it with a guy, I'll say, I almost kind of always follow up with, hey, just not as much now, but especially back then, I would say, just so you know, I'm not attracted to you.
It's just like that.
It's not like I'm attracted to every guy.
Let the elephant out of the room.
Yeah. Don't be nervous. I don't want to be with you. So that was a big deal for me. But friendships continue to get deeper. The circles continue to get wider. And it was a lot. And what has been amazing is every time I told somebody, I was always met with the other person saying, like, without me asking, they would just say, you know, thank you so much for sharing. For me, and then they would share their big thing with me.
Wow.
And as they did that, it just kept happening. And I started to see that's the result of me being vulnerable. They're going to share something back. That's crazy. Like, at first it kept catching me off guard. Like, oh yeah, that's awesome. That's great. But it took our relationship from here to, like, it went so much deeper, so much quicker. And as anyone knows about me, I don't like the surface stuff. So I was like, oh, this is actually like a gift. Like, if I share this, you know, I can go super deep instantly. You know,
it wasn't just
awesome.
You getting to air out your stuff. It was like, it was a mutual thing.
Yeah. But I also understand that there could be someone listening that is like, you know what, I tried to share it with somebody and they didn't handle it that way.
Yeah.
And they shamed me and anything, you know, the possibilities are endless of what your story was. But I want to reach out to you right now and say, I feel you. I love you, and Jesus sees you, and keep going.
Yeah, don't give up.
Don't give up looking for that person. Somebody out there cares, and you can always email us and tell us if you have no one else. But so yeah, that's a big thing.
So it seems like we have seen that vulnerability in friendships is not super common, especially with men. So I think a lot of people do want that ultimately, and might need to take a step towards it. So how would you encourage them? Like, what would you say to that?
It's a hard answer, but main thing I would just say, go first. If you're wanting vulnerability and you want that in a friendship, then you go first. It's what we're doing right here, right now.
Yeah.
Well, why are we willing to sit and talk about this and open up our story? Because hopefully we're going first for people and saying, in this open space, you can go first, and then the other person will feel more seen and connect to you in a different way. But my main thing about how do you get vulnerable, you have to be willing to go first and kind of throw it out there. And again, that's wisdom, and not running around telling everyone your stuff, but being smart with the people in your life that you
totally. I think it can be revealing. It obviously is revealing to a relationship.
Yeah.
When how people respond to your vulnerability. If you do decide to go first, it can reveal a lot about what the possibilities are for that friendship. Mm-hmm. And maybe you find like, oh, I could sense, and maybe it wasn't a completely unsafe space, but maybe you sense like they weren't super pumped about going there. Mm-hmm. But like we have found, I mean, the more that we have done it, the more that we've actually practiced it, the more that we have found who those friendships are, like where the other people that are willing to go there with us, that are willing to say, oh, okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Also, this is what I struggle with. So talk about what it's like for you with those guys in particular that you have found in your life that are willing to have a mutually vulnerable relationship, friendship. Talk about what that looks like and how you can do that in a healthy way, understanding that your area of temptation is towards men. Mm-hmm. So how do you do that?
It was a journey, and it has been a long process, and it was kind of brutal at the beginning. I had to learn how to have mature, deep friendships that didn't leave me wanting to be intimate.
Yeah.
And I understand the listener that is being educated and learning, if you don't have this desire with that, you might be like,
Because intimacy before would just equal like sexual encounters.
yes.
Correct?
Yeah. Because I didn't have any healthy discussion, I didn't realize anything else.
Right.
Yes. It equaled, if we're going to get close, then we're going to have to like get physical.
Yeah.
So over the years, as I worked through that, I've gotten to a really healthy place now, through a lot of counseling and guys being willing to work that out with me, who are all my still closest friends for years and years and years, who have walked the journey with me. But now with my guy friends, like when it's interesting that as someone who struggles with same-sex attraction, for guys, it's socially acceptable to take trips together, to be in locker rooms together, to do all these things that seem normal to guys. But to someone like me, that doesn't feel normal because it feels like I'm entering an unsafe zone all the time. So we've had to figure out how to do that. And I've had to set up my guardrails and my boundaries of where I can go, where I can't go. When I take trips with my best friends, example is when we take trips together and we either get my own room, or if I'm rooming with guys that are my best friends that they know I'm not going to share a bed. So my struggle, I get my own bed because of my struggle.
That's a benefit.
It's a benefit. But also like they know that they go to the bathroom in a hotel to change. They're not going to change in the room with me, and they're not going to be undressing in front of me. Like we have specific boundaries.
Which is amazing because it sounds like it could be so awkward to even ask for that.
Yeah.
But because you have developed these, you now have so much experience with how to have healthy relationships with other guys that you're not afraid to ask that for that.
Yeah.
And you know that you have safety with these people that they're going to be like, oh yeah, I would never have thought about that. But thank you for telling me. And I'm happy to.
Yes. It's
comply.
about enlightening and helping people. And that's part of what we hope to do. But even it's a lot of enlightening people. Hey, this is how I think about it. And so just know it'd be really helpful for me in this.
And that doesn't mean that you're attracted to them.
No.
It just means that like I think that most people can understand.
Make
like,
no provision for the flesh.
Yes.
So get rid of all the things that could go in your mind, and then you're good. Yeah.
Love it. How would you explain your current like daily fight? How would you explain that to people, like where you stand today, and with all of the discipline that you have in place, with all of the things that you have seen the Lord do with the people and community? How would you explain your current state?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. I have prayed that God would remove this desire from me. And to this point, he hasn't. And so it's still there. I still struggle today with it. And I believe that God can remove it because he can do anything. He hasn't chosen to do that with me. So I need to understand how he wants to use it in my life. And that's what I've been doing.
It's amazing. And you do an incredible job with it. And I personally see you do that every day. I walk with you. I live with you. And I have been on the journey as you have fought for healthy relationships with guys and healthy community. And I've watched you battle wanting to retreat. And I've watched you step in and lean in, even when you are feeling, when you're wanting to kind of be consumed by darkness. And I've watched you for now 20 plus years choose to fight through that. And I want to encourage anyone who's fighting anything in community or with a person or people, that there's so much, there's obviously an incredible possibility. We've seen that. We're standing on the other side of that and trusting God for more. But we've fumbled through it, and everybody will. And it hasn't been a perfect road. It hasn't been like you put your stake in the ground and there was never any turning back. Mm-hmm. And that I think is the case for all of us. But it's a worthy fight. And even when you feel discouraged, or even when you have found like people that might feel weird after you reveal your stuff and reveal your story, you have continued to choose to find the people that don't feel weird about it, and that are going to be a safe and
real lucky with
healthy. That. Yes, we have been incredibly blessed with people in our lives that are willing to walk with us and stand by us and hold up our arms. So I want to end with a real zinger.
Okay.
This is probably what a lot of people want to know, but how would you identify? How would you label yourself?
Isn't that what everyone wants in this day and age?
Absolutely. We don't want to be put in a box, but we want to know what box to put you in.
Yeah. How could we put you in a box if we had to? I will say it's interesting. It's a tricky question. Some of even my friends would say, I've heard them reference me and say that know this about me. Say, yeah, he's gay, but he's fighting it. And I'll say my honest thoughts in this moment is that I don't see myself. I would not say that I am gay. I would not say that I am homosexual, that I'm gay. I would not say those things because I think that implies that you are choosing to live that lifestyle. That's how I would view it. And I'm not choosing to live that lifestyle. I think I would want, first and foremost, for the person to hear that I would identify as a child of God. I have been adopted by him. I am a child of God. That is my identity. My identity is that I am his kid. So everything else is secondary. But if I have to answer that question, I would say that I am a man who is fighting to follow Jesus, and I have a proclivity to same-sex attraction, but I'm choosing to fight it.
It's amazing.
And everyone else can try to put the box around it or say something about me, but that is my truth.
That's
is
right.
That I am a child of God and I'm following him, and that is what I would say.
I love that, and I love you, and I'm very proud of you.
I love you so much.
I think people will find so much hope just in you choosing to go first and being willing to say, even when you feel like you are fumbling through anything, to be able to say, this is what I want to tell you because I want you to find freedom, because I want you to find hope, because I want you to know that there are other options that you might not have ever considered before. Not because you think you have all the answers. You are one of the most humble people. You never lead with any kind of overconfidence or self, like you are aware of your weakness. You are aware of what you need, and that inspires me all the time to also be aware, like no matter what I think that I'm good at, no matter what I think that I can muscle through, to have an incredibly healthy awareness of my need for Jesus. And you lead me to that. And so I'm grateful for that. And I know that you have done that for so many people today.
Well, I'll just wrap with saying that when you receive the grace that I've received, first and foremost from Jesus, and then from you as I opened up and took a gamble, and then from a friend, one friend, and then two friends and three friends, and now community, that we would say. And the grace that I've received, there is no room for anyone to stand up and say, I have all the answers, or all we can do is just say, we know where grace comes from and we follow him. And that's what we're staking our life on.
That's it. Hey, we're so glad that you have joined us today. And we really hope that you've found some refreshment from hearing Jeff's story and hearing his vulnerability. You did an amazing job of just really tapping into those deep places. And so that's why we're doing this once again. We want you to find hope in the midst of what might be feel like a hopeless situation. We want you to find possibility for what you might have thought was impossible. And so that's what we have found. That's what we've seen. And so we would also love to hear your questions. I'm sure that this conversation has probably stirred up a lot of questions for you. And so we'd love to know what those are. You can go to openspacespodcast.com, stay connected with us, send in your questions, and we'd love to stay connected.
And many of you listening, you may have your jaw dropped right now and sitting there thinking, that's not what I thought, that's not what I expected. And you may have confusion on a lot of this topic that we're talking about. And I think what's great is that in the next episode, you're going to hear from Jourdan, who is going to be able to relate to that, how she came into this conversation with blindsided of like, oh, now I'm in this story with him, and this is something that has hit me head on, and I have to face, and I have to figure out how to talk about this topic of same-sex attraction, and what do I think about it, where do I stand on my beliefs, and how does that intersect with my faith, just all of it. There's just so much there. So in episode 3, you're gonna actually probably relate a lot to Jourdan if you're in the place right now listening to this, like, what is happening? So you're gonna relate to her. She's gonna share her history, her background, how she came into this whole thing, and just really enlighten you with the grace that she's given me and the love that she's shown me, and how I have felt so loved and cared for by her in it. So come back for episode 3 of Open Spaces, and we'll see you next time.